Nov 19th, 1942. The winds across the Russian steppe grow colder. The leaves fall over. The ruins of a city that has already become a graveyard of men and machines, Stalingrad. For months, the German Sixth Army, led by General Friedrich Paulus, has fought street by street, house by house, in a brutal struggle to seize the city that bears Stalin's name. Every building, every cellar, every pile of rubble has turned into a fortress. But beneath the chaos and destruction, something even greater is taking shape. While the Germans are consumed by the fight within Stalingrad's shattered streets, the part2 Soviet High Command, Stavka, is planning a massive counterattack. Their goal is not merely to defend the city. Their goal is to trap an entire German army. Soft background music rises, tension builds. Narrator. In Moscow, General Zhukov and General Vasilevsky present a bold plan to Joseph Stalin, Operation Uranus. Its purpose, to encircle the German Sixth Army by striking at its weaker flanks, which are held not by German troops, but by their allies, the Romanians, Italians and Hungarians, poorly equipped, undertrained, and stretched thin across hundreds of kilometers of open steppe. Sound of papers rustling, maps being spread out. The Soviet plan is simple, yet daring. Two massive offensives will strike from the north and south of Stalingrad, converging near the town of Kalash on the Don River. If successful, the trap will close around more than 250,000 Axis soldiers. Narrator. Unaware of the danger, the German Sixth Army continues to press forward inside the city. Hitler has demanded that Stalingrad must fall at any cost. He believes capturing it will cripple Soviet morale. Meanwhile, to the north and south, tens of thousands of Soviet soldiers, tanks, and artillery are being assembled in secrecy. Supply convoys move only at night. Camouflage nets cover entire forests of artillery. Local villagers are ordered to silence. The Red Army prepares for something enormous. Narrator softly. The Germans think winter will bring only snow and silence, but instead, it will bring the thunder of a new Soviet storm. Sound of distant artillery fades in. Narrator. The date is set, November 19th, 1942. At exactly 7:20 a.m., the world will change forever. Frozen hope, Manstein's relief and the dying city. December 1942. Winter has claimed the steppe. The wind screams endlessly across the frozen plains, carrying with it the smell of smoke, oil, and death. Inside Stalingrad, the German Sixth Army still holds on, starving, freezing, surrounded. Their only hope now lies far to the southwest, where one man prepares a desperate rescue attempt. Field Marshal Erich von Manstein. Manstein's mission. Manstein arrives at the newly formed army group, Don headquarters in the town of Novocherkassk. His orders are clear: break through Soviet lines and relieve the trapped Sixth Army. On his desk lies a map of the southern front, the Don River, the steppe, and a single word circled in red: Stalingrad. It's over 100 kilometers away. Between his forces and Paulus's pocket lie the Soviet 51st, 57th, and 5th Shock Armies, battle-hardened, entrenched, and ready. Still, Manstein knows the Sixth Army cannot survive much longer. The airlift is failing, the men are dying, and the Führer refuses to allow Paulus to break out. He calls his new operation Wintergewitter, Operation Winter Storm. The relief begins. December 12, 1942. The German 4th Panzer Army, under General Hermann Hoth, begins its attack from the town of Kotelnikovo. The assault crashes into the Soviet lines like a steel avalanche. Tanks, half-tracks, and artillery surging through snow-covered plains. For the first time in months, the Germans are advancing again. Radio transmissions from Stalingrad erupt with cautious hope. Relief force approaching from the southwest, the message reads. Hold your positions. Manstein is coming. Inside the pocket, morale flickers like a dying flame reignited. Soldiers whisper to one another, "We'll be free by Christmas." But Christmas is still far away. Supplies have all but vanished. Men die through the snow for frozen horse meat. Frostbite blackens fingers and faces. Ammunition runs low. In cellars beneath the ruined factories of Stalingrad, wounded men lie in rows on the cold ground, covered with rags. Doctors have no morphine, no bandages. A captain writes in his diary, "We are ghosts now. Every morning we count who is still alive. Every night the bombers return, and the snow glows red again. Above them, the Luftwaffe struggles in vain. Pilots fly through blizzards to drop small canisters of food and ammunition. Many never return. Manstein's advance. Meanwhile, Manstein's spearhead, the 57th Panzer Corps, pushes forward with astonishing speed. By December 19th, they reach the Mishkova River, less than 50 kilometers from the outer edge of the Stalingrad pocket. For the men trapped inside, salvation feels close enough to touch. Paulus's officers urge him to prepare for a breakout. The path may be narrow, but it's their only chance. But Paulus hesitates. Hitler's orders are absolute. The Sixth Army will remain at Stalingrad. It will be supplied by air and relieved from the outside. The noose tightens. Operation Ring begins. January 10, 1943. Dawn breaks over a silent, frozen wasteland. The ruins of Stalingrad lie buried under snow and ash. A ghost city of shattered buildings and frozen corpses. From the Volga to the Don, the air is heavy with silence, until the thunder begins again. Operation Ring. At exactly 8:05 a.m., thousands of Soviet guns open fire. The bombardment shakes the earth itself. Over 7,000 artillery pieces, mortars, and Katyusha rockets unleash a storm unlike anything the trapped Germans have ever endured. For 55 minutes, the fire never stops. The night sky turns red, the ground trembles, and entire positions vanish under sheets of flame. Operation Ring, the Soviet plan to annihilate the encircled Sixth Army, has begun. When the barrage ends, the Red Army advances. Wave after wave of soldiers push through the snow. The 65th, 21st, 24th, and 66th Armies move as one, supported by tanks and close airstrikes. German positions crumble. Weary, frostbitten men fire their last rounds from behind heaps of rubble. Machine guns jam in the cold. Some units fight to the last man. Others surrender without a shot. Inside the German lines, in bunkers and basements, the survivors listen to the constant roar of battle growing closer. The once mighty Sixth Army is now a shattered remnant. Out of 300,000 men, fewer than 90,000 can still fight. The rest are dead, wounded, or too weak to stand. At Gumruk Airfield, the Army's last lifeline, wrecked aircraft lie half buried in snow. Soviet shells rain down constantly. On January 13th, the final transport plane lifts off under fire, carrying the last wounded out of Stalingrad. It never returns. From this day forward, the Sixth Army is completely cut off from the outside world. Soviet advance. Soviet troops advance steadily, methodically, block by block, trench by trench. Every street becomes a battle, every basement a bunker. Civilians who once hid in cellars now emerge to find only ruins. Frozen bodies lie stacked in the streets, dusted white by snow. The smell of smoke and decay fills the air. The Red Army captures hundreds of prisoners daily. Many surrender with their hands shaking from hunger and exhaustion, whispering only "Brot, Wasser, bread, water." The Soviets look upon them not as the invincible German soldiers of 1941, but as ghosts, beaten, broken, and human again. In the command post, inside the ruins of the former Univermag department store, General Friedrich Paulus establishes his new headquarters. He sits at a desk surrounded by cold concrete walls, his face hollow, his uniform worn and dusty. Reports come in constantly. All the same, we are surrounded. Out of ammunition. No supplies left. An officer enters. "Herr General, what are your orders?" Paulus stares at the map in silence. The lines no longer matter. The Sixth Army no longer exists as an army. It's only fragments now, scattered across the ruins of Stalingrad. Shadows and reckoning. The war rages on. But the shadow of Stalingrad stretches far beyond the ruins of a single city. The fall of the Sixth Army marks a turning point, not just for Germany, but for the world. Paulus' final years. In captivity, Paulus becomes a reluctant symbol of Germany's shattered pride. He is moved from Moscow to Krasnogorsk, then later to Berlin for interrogations and public appearances, orchestrated by the Soviets. He never returns to active command. The war passes him by, yet he watches its destruction unfold from afar. The bombing of German cities, the invasion of Normandy, the relentless advance of the Allies. Each report deepens his sense of personal and collective failure. By 1944, Paulus takes a decisive step. He joins the National Committee for a Free Germany, addressing broadcast to German soldiers still fighting. His words are calm but piercing. Every day the war continues, more German blood is shed for nothing. For the first time, he is no longer a soldier of obedience. He is a soldier of conscience. When he dies in 1957, in Dresden, it is quietly, uncelebrated, yet haunted, the memory of Stalingrad never leaving him, etched into every thought, every dream, every silence. The Sixth Army's ghosts. The soldiers of the Sixth Army leave Stalingrad in fragments. Some die along the march to captivity. Some survive, returning years later to towns that are themselves shadows of what they once were. The war takes different forms for these men. Some are consumed by guilt, replaying the decisions that cost thousands of lives. Some seek comfort in rebuilding, in family, in the routines of life that the battlefield destroyed. Some disappear into silence, their minds never leaving the snow-swept ruins of the Volga. Historians later referred to the 6th Army as a case study in military hubris, a force destroyed not merely by bullets or bombs, but by winter, by overconfidence, and by the unyielding will of the Soviet defenders. Global aftermath. Stalingrad changes the world. In Germany, the shockwaves are political and personal. Hitler's generals are no longer untouchable. The myth of Nazi invincibility crumbles. Families wait in vain for letters from sons who never return. Cities brace for the war's escalation, knowing the tide has shifted. In the Soviet Union, Stalingrad is immortalized as a symbol of sacrifice and strength. The propaganda is fierce, but the truth is undeniable. A massive human effort, suffering beyond comprehension, and unyielding courage turned the tide. For the Allies, it is a sign that victory is possible. Momentum begins to tilt. Europe braces for a long and bloody road, but hope, however fragile, ignites. Echoes of Stalingrad. Years pass, but the echoes of Stalingrad linger, long after the guns have fallen silent. The city rises slowly from its ashes, brick by brick, street by street, but the scars remain, in the streets, in the minds of survivors, and in the collective memory of a world forever changed. The survivors return. For the few who survive Soviet captivity, homecoming is bittersweet. Of the 91,000 who left Stalingrad alive, only a fraction ever crossed the German border again. They return to towns and villages that themselves bear the marks of war. Destroyed homes, missing neighbors, shattered families. Many carry deep physical wounds, frostbitten limbs, broken backs, scars etched into flesh. Others bear invisible injuries, a haunted look in their eyes, tremors that come unbidden, sleep that is never deep. The stories of horror they endured are too heavy to speak aloud, too painful to share with those who have not seen death frozen in the snow. Yet, amid the grief, there is a quiet resilience. Survivors rebuild their lives, tend to families, and honor the dead, though some never fully escape the shadow of Stalingrad. The ghosts of war. Stalingrad becomes a symbol, not only of military triumph, but of human suffering at its most extreme. Veterans of both sides speak of it in hushed tones, often decades later, the weight of memory pressing on them like the frozen Volga. Soviet soldiers who stormed the ruins describe streets haunted by the silence of the dead. They tell of children's toys half buried in rubble, of letters that never reached their recipients, of entire neighborhoods that vanished overnight. German soldiers who returned speak of comrades who vanished in the cold, of the long march to captivity, of the endless snow that swallowed men whole. They remember Paulus not as a general, but as a man who embodied obedience, tragedy, and, in a strange turn, a warning to others. Lessons etched in ice. Stalingrad leaves behind lessons as stark as the winter that defined the battle. War is total. No plan, no machine, no strategy can contain the chaos when human lives are measured as expendable numbers. Obedience has a cost. Paulus' surrender demonstrates the moral weight of following orders. The fine line between duty and blind loyalty. Resilience endures. Even amid total destruction, human life adapts. Cities rise again, families recover, and hope persists, fragile but unbroken. Historians, scholars, and ordinary people all grapple with Stalingrad's meaning. For some, it is a military case study. For others, it is a moral crucible. And for those who lived it, it is a wound that never fully heals. The memory of the city. By the 1950s, Stalingrad has begun to rebuild. Factories rise where rubble once lay. Streets are renamed. Monuments are erected to honor the fallen. Yet the city itself refuses to forget. Operation Uranus, The Fire Awakens. Narrator. November 19, 1942, 07:20 a.m. The frozen silence of the Russian steppe is shattered by the roar of thousands of Soviet guns. A blinding flash sweeps across the horizon as 3,500 artillery pieces unleash their fury in unison. For nearly 90 minutes, the thunder of shells rolls across the battlefield like an unending earthquake. The German lines to the north of Stalingrad, held mostly by the Romanian Third Army, disappear under clouds of fire and smoke. Sound, explosions, whistling shells, shouts in the distance. Narrator. This is Operation Uranus, the grand counteroffensive that Stalin, Zhukov, and Vasilevsky have planned for months in secrecy. The target, the weak Axis flanks that protect the German Sixth Army. For weeks, Soviet reconnaissance units have mapped every trench, every bunker, every frozen river crossing, and now the Red Army strikes with overwhelming force. Narrator. At the northern front, General Vatutin's southwestern front hurls the 5th Tank Army and the 21st Army into the Romanian defenses. Soviet T-34 tanks burst through the morning mist, their engines roaring as they smash through barbed wire and anti-tank obstacles. Romanian soldiers, outnumbered and outgunned, fight bravely, but their anti-tank guns are few. Their morale is crumbling, and their lines begin to collapse. Within hours, entire divisions are in retreat, leaving behind burning vehicles and shattered weapons. Music rises, urgency builds. Narrator. To the south, the second hammer of the Soviet plan swings forward. The Stalingrad front, under General Yeremenko and the watchful eye of Nikita Khrushchev, strikes the Romanian Fourth Army near the Chia River. Once again, the Axis lines buckle under the pressure. Soviet infantry surges forward through blinding snow, shouting, "Za Rodinu!" For the motherland. Behind them, columns of T-34s and KV tanks advance relentlessly, crushing frozen earth beneath their tracks. Narrator. By midday, Soviet spearheads have torn deep gaps into both flanks of the German Sixth Army. Reports flood into German headquarters, but they are dismissed at first. General Paulus believes these are small local attacks, not a full-scale offensive. Even as the front collapses, Hitler insists that the Sixth Army must hold its ground inside Stalingrad. Narrator, somber tone. It is the greatest mistake of his military career. Transition, the sound of fading artillery, replaced by the rumble of tanks and the whistle of the cold wind. Narrator. On November 20th, the second day of Operation Uranus, the Soviets strike again, this time from the south and the southwest. The 51st and 57th Armies smash through the remnants of the Romanian lines, racing toward the Don River. The German airfields and supply depots behind the front are thrown into chaos. Columns of trucks, guns, and refugees choke the icy roads. Soviet tank commanders push their crews to the limit. Many tanks run out of fuel or ammunition. The aftermath. Ghosts of Stalingrad. February 1943. The guns have fallen silent. The Battle of Stalingrad, the bloodiest struggle in human history, is over. But silence does not mean peace. It is the silence of death, of a city turned to ash, of men who will never return. The end of the Sixth Army. The once proud Sixth Army, which had marched across Europe like an unstoppable machine, no longer exists. What remains are shattered units, starving survivors, and a handful of broken commanders who now walk under Soviet guard. In the ruins of the Univermag department store, where the final German headquarters once stood, General Friedrich Paulus sits motionless. The walls are black with soot, the windows shattered. He has surrendered, the first German field marshal ever to be taken alive. In his eyes there is no triumph, no pride, only disbelief. A Soviet officer asks, "Why did you not surrender earlier? So many could have lived." Paulus answers quietly, "Because I obeyed orders." The prisoners. Across the frozen wasteland, the survivors begin their march into captivity. 91,000 men, Germans, Romanians, Italians, Hungarians, stumble through the snow, many barefoot wrapped in rags. The wounded are carried on sleds. The dead are left behind. They are marched hundreds of kilometers to collection camps, then packed into trains bound for the Soviet interior. The journey takes weeks. No food, little water, bitter cold. Thousands die along the way, frozen in the boxcars, buried in nameless fields. Of those captured at Stalingrad, fewer than 6,000 will ever return home. Most will perish in Soviet captivity, from disease, starvation, or exhaustion. For many families back in Germany, no message ever comes. Their sons simply vanish into the snow. The city of death. Stalingrad itself is no longer a city. It is a vast graveyard of concrete and steel, every building shattered, every street filled with the wreckage of war. Over 40,000 civilians lie dead beneath the rubble. Entire districts have been wiped from the map. Soviet soldiers wander through the ruins, stunned by what they see. The Volga River is frozen solid, littered with the remains of men and machines. The stench of decay lingers for months after the battle ends. But amid the horror, there is victory. For the first time since 1941, the Red Army has not only stopped the German advance, it has destroyed an entire army. The world reacts. News of the surrender spreads across the world like a shockwave. In Berlin, Hitler refuses to believe it at first. He rages in his headquarters, blaming his generals, his allies, anyone but himself. He declares that Paulus should have taken his own life, that a field marshal does not surrender. In London, Churchill calls Stalingrad the turning point of the war. In Moscow, Stalin simply lights his pipe and says, "The rats have been trapped." Across occupied Europe, the myth of Nazi invincibility shatters overnight. Encircled, the steel trap tightens. November 24, 1942. The wind howls across the frozen plains west of Stalingrad. Snow falls heavier now, thick, silent, merciless. Beneath the white blanket lie the broken remains of the Axis armies. In the distance, Soviet tanks stand guard over captured positions. Columns of prisoners march east under the watchful eyes of Red Army soldiers. The proud banners of the German 6th Army are now nothing more than tattered cloth blowing in the bitter wind. The trap, the Kessel, as the Germans will call it, is complete. Around 300,000 Axis soldiers are trapped inside a vast pocket roughly 50 kilometers wide and 40 kilometers deep. To the west, the Soviets hold Kalash and the Don crossings. To the south, they've severed the last roads leading out. And to the east, Stalingrad itself remains a smoking ruin, still crawling with desperate German and Soviet troops locked in brutal street fighting. Inside the pocket, the 6th Army is surrounded, isolated from supplies, fuel and reinforcements. Inside German headquarters, Gumrak Airfield, the crackle of radios, the scratching of pencils over maps, muffled explosions in the distance. Inside a commandeered farmhouse near Gumrak Airfield, General Friedrich Paulus studies a flickering map. Radio messages from the front are frantic. Units cut off, divisions missing, ammunition nearly gone. Sir, we've lost contact with the 44th and 376th divisions. The Romanians have completely collapsed, reports a tired officer. Paulus looks up slowly. Where are the relief forces? There are none, Herr General. For a long moment, silence fills the room. Paulus finally understands the truth. His entire army is trapped. But orders from Berlin are absolute. The 6th Army will stand fast at Stalingrad. It will not retreat 1 meter. Hitler's headquarters, Rastenburg, East Prussia. Hundreds of kilometers away, Hitler refuses to believe the reports. He declares that the Soviet attack is only a temporary setback, that Paulus merely needs to hold his ground until the Luftwaffe can resupply the encircled army by air. The plan is madness. To keep the 6th Army alive, 600 tons of supplies per day are needed. The Luftwaffe can barely deliver 90 tons on a good day. Planes are shot down daily. Pilots freeze to death on runways. The airfields inside the pocket become graveyards of twisted metal and shattered hopes. Inside the pocket, the trapped soldiers dig in, fortifying villages and trenches, rationing the last scraps of food. Each day the temperature falls lower, -20, -30 degrees Celsius. Men wrap themselves in curtains and old uniforms. Vehicles are left to freeze solid. Weapons jam with ice. The cough of a soldier breaks the silence. A faint fire crackles. A young man writes by candlelight. Dear Anna, the snow never stops. We eat once a day, if that. They say the Führer will rescue us soon, but I don't believe it anymore.